Welcome back to this reading of Auralia's Colors. Today we're going to be reading, I suppose I should have the book right side up. We'll be reading Chapter 8, The Unguarded Gallery. You may have noticed I'm reading in a different space than I have been reading. That's because today I have a lot of work to do here at the office at Seattle Pacific University. Seattle Pacific University is the place, the community, the school within which I grew as a creative writer, as a fiction writer in the early 90s. And it was soon after I graduated from Seattle Pacific that I began working on the Auralia Thread, all 4 books of it. Today, though, it's not just the location that is going to be a little different. I am introducing something special to this recording project today. You know, Christopher Orr is the primary visual artist that I talk about when I talk about these books. I was so blessed by WaterBrook Multnomah Press, by their incredible staff, to get to work with this great artist who really understood the stories, really understood the tone, really understood my desire to encourage readers to use their own imaginations. And I've received so many comments over the years from people who love the covers for these books because not only are they specific and breathtaking and detailed and just gorgeous, they also often reserve elements of the scene for the reader's imagination to continue filling in the rest of the world. For example, one of the things we were most pleased with this cover, me and the editors and the readers, is that allowed Auralia's face to be something that they imagine for themselves. Now, over the years, one of the great joys of this project has been talking with readers, yes, but even more so, discovering people talking about the books without any of my own involvement, where you get the sense that you're getting the real deal now, what they really think, and even hearing harsh criticism or questions or the occasional excitement has been very rewarding and motivating, makes me want to keep writing. But perhaps even more specific than that, it has been a great pleasure to discover visual artists who have been inspired by what they are reading, to bring some of this to life so that I can see what they are imagining as they read. And in those images, we often get very different specifics from what I was imagining, visualizing, and what the cover artist Christopher Orr was visualizing. I love that variety. It's like a conversation in pictures. Today, as I read Chapter 8, the Unguarded Gallery, I'm going to share an image that comes from one of those artists. I stumbled onto this work quite unexpectedly. I was actually looking for some concept art that Christopher Orr had developed as he was working on the book covers. So I was doing Google image searches for Cinder's Midnight and Auralia's Colors, and suddenly I saw these pictures I'd never seen before, and I investigated and discovered an artist named Christine Makashib. And Christine, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I've never met her in person, but I did write to her to say, these are beautiful images. What's going on here? And she was developing a student portfolio of work. And those images have become some of my favorites. I'll share others eventually. But I'd like to show you one that I wish I had included in a previous recording. It just occurred to me this week, why am I not sharing some of this art with the world? I could have used some of those images in previous installments of this recording series. So I'm going to share some images on the screen here. Here, of course, is Christopher Orr's cover for Auralia's Colors. But now you're going to see an image I could have used reading the opening chapter. This is an image by Christine of Krog and Warney discovering the child, discovering Auralia as a baby on the banks of the Throne Skull River. And I love this. I love the color and the depth and the dimension, and again, allowing us to imagine these characters up close. But that is not far from the kind of images I was seeing as I wrote, that I was discovering as I wrote. Because for me, writing is more a process of discovery than of putting down what already exists in my head. So I really love this portrayal of the discovery of Auralia. That could have gone very well with chapter 1, Old Thieves Make a Discovery. Let's look at another one. This one could have been just here in the last couple of readings. Here we have the ale boy out on his raft on Deep Lake, pondering ripples on the water, suffering perhaps in his loneliness, frustrated with the errands that he has to run to flatter the egos of others. And perhaps this is right before the raft is upset by whatever is swimming, disrupted by whatever is swimming beneath him. So this is a particularly beautiful image that I love by Christine McAshee. Today, though, as I read, we will get to look at Christine's work with a moment from this particular chapter, chapter 8, The Unguarded Gallery. Eventually, I will advance the image to a photograph that I think suits the conclusion of the chapter. That is a photograph I found and not one of Christine's works. Chapter 8, The Unguarded Gallery. Roots like carrots bled orange dye. Taters from the house kitchen rot bins could be mashed into pastes of brown, white, and gray. When fading summer brought the water level down from the doors of the caves, wide plates of slate lay safe for Auralia's painting. Colors rivered and washed in tides in her head, and she swept them accordingly across stone canvases. The moonlight was enough, and when it was not, she worked with shimmering hues that danced up the cliffs to light the tree trunks and illuminate the outstretched, wind-shaped boughs. Ever since she could crawl, she had collected the colors of the expanse, discerning the secrets of their making, and she had not been idle with the secrets 15 years had taught her. All this she shared with the ale boy, walking through the caves with torch in hand as though discovering the colors for the first time. Many experiments had collapsed, and many inspirations had come to preposterous conclusions, but sometimes the work had revealed itself and become a thing of beauty or a device she had never imagined. She laughed, embarrassed by some of the garish displays she had made. He laughed, too, because such passion seemed so dangerous and sure to be stolen or destroyed. The walls were pockmarked with hand-carved indentations, each housing an exquisite invention. A small pillow of white feathers, loosely bound by yellow grass and fringed with burgundy moss. Walking sticks, gnarled and smooth, stained in a spectrum of colors from regal blue to burnished gold. Autumn leaves spread into fans, sun-dried, glazed with amber, ready to be brandished against summer's stifling heat. A stone cutter with a bone-white grip and a bold red sheath. And bowls of all shapes and colors. I like to make things that can hold other things, she said. As she ran her fingertips along the wall, she murmured reminders about what needed work, what was good enough. And the ale boy even caught her arguing with herself over the proper recipient for each gift. Gifts, hundreds of them, not showy gallery exhibits. Auralia had stored up ready remedies and surprises for the gatherers. The fan, poor Wenji is always too warm. And the pillow, Richella gonna birth her baby soon. Impossible that such a menagerie glittered unguarded within Abascar's reach. And yet, the king had not found and buried these things in the Underkeep. Nobody bothers with this end of the lake, she explained. Sometimes traders or soldiers will pass by, but it's like they're blind. They don't look closely, or they're looking for the wrong things. They come out with a mind for conflict, not for savoring. The farther from Abascar, the more they sharpen their swords and move all hasty-like. But isn't it dangerous, living out here alone? Of course it's dangerous, she snapped bitterly. More dangerous every day. But aren't there dangers inside Abascar's walls? And really, what do they expect? The woods wouldn't be dangerous if they hadn't left it to run so wild. Now they're afraid of it and probably ashamed. Ashamed. Ashamed they've forgotten how to live here. They're too busy making piles of things they think they need and then building walls around them. Makes them think there's nothing out here they need. But out here, they'd remember that they're small and that they need help. The ale boy nodded as though he'd thought of this before. He was, after all, painfully aware of his smallness and his constant need for help. Auralia stopped to whistle at a cave bird with its oily feathers and bulging, lidless eyes. Why should the forest care what becomes of Abascar when they've left it in such a state? Why do you stay, then? She shrugged. How could I leave the gatherers? They found me, took care of me until I could walk, gave me a place. They didn't have to help me. And I wanted them to know, but they know, he interrupted. They've known for a long, long time. Whenever I visit the gatherers, they're talking about you. They worry about you. You've repaid them, I think, Auralia. You don't have to stay. You can get away before something happens, before officers start telling you what kind of colors you can't use. Perhaps. What do you want me to do? Stay, he blushed. She blinked at him. You're a funny thing, ale boy. Feeling very small indeed, the ale boy watched the waves of light splashing across the waiting gifts. He was tempted to ask if he could stay here in this heart of craft and care, a place so different from the Underkeep's corridors, with their unsettling transient winds, their mysterious groans, their tangled and knotted labyrinths. He had caught a glimpse at last of what made Auralia skirt Abascar's borders and resist the pull of its gravity. Auralia's way was to bless the undeserving, not reward those who gave her what she wanted. What hope could she have when Abascar punished orphans who did not learn to follow instructions? Unless... He returned to questions that grew stronger every day. Why was he an exception? He had never been cast out. He had never been awarded badges or subjected to the tests. What had he done that Abascar favored him? What had set him apart from orphans who were given over to the gatherers in sufficient care? Fear kept him from voicing such questions. lest the matter had simply been overlooked, lest officers should investigate, mutter their regret, and toss him into the wilderness. But now he wondered if there was some secret bargain that could be struck that would allow Auralia to dwell freely within the palace as he did. What was this third path, this life beyond the two extremes, the tedious exchange of labor for protection within Abascar's enclosure and the scramble for survival on the perilous side of Abascar's walls? He began to wonder which of Aurelia's inventions might be useful to bribe an official or win a special pardon. Not even the palace stuff's good like this, he told her, picking up 2 discs of polished sea glass in a small rectangular frame of twigs. Try holding them up to your eyes. He propped the frame on the bridge of his nose and peered through the discs. Auralia and the torch loomed larger, a bit blurry, but unmistakable. You know old Radish? His eyes are so bad he can't see what's in his spoon before he lifts it to his mouth. She hushed her voice as if the old gatherer might be nearby. As they wandered through the ascending passage, the ale-boy saw more and more and more, things pieced together so perfectly, it was hard to imagine why no one had done so before. What did a tree cone have to do with an array of butterfly wings when fitted together just so, and then tossed skyward, they became a spinning, gliding top? What did honeycombs have to do with the spines of husk tree leaves? In her hands, they became slow-burning candles with brilliant gold flames. I never knew there were so many colors. How do you find so many? I put 2 colors together just to see what they'll do with each other. This one will swallow that one. This one, mixed with that one, disappears, but it makes this one weaker at the same time. Sometimes they join. She clapped her hands. Echoes of applause sounded around them, as though 100 other children answered from 100 different caves. And whoosh, you see something new and amazing. The ale-boy thought of Obsidia Dram, mixing her wines and tasting them. I just know there's got to be more of them. Aurelia's pale brow was crumpled in concentration. She walked faster, her finger tracing a yellow spiral painted along the wall in a line like that of a wind-blown leaf that never settles. I know there's some colors missing. I can feel it. Here, she paused before a heavy vine-weave curtain that veiled another cave, closed her fists, and pressed them to her temples. It's like I used to see other colors, and now something's keeping them out of my head. Without them, everything seems unfinished. Everything. She spread her arms wide. It's all imperfect, and I don't know how I know. Everything here is perfect, he thought. Isn't it? If he saw this, King Calmarcus would ask you to paint the walls of his house. He reached absently for the curtain. Paint the walls? They should let me rip them down. Auralia grabbed his arm and drew him forward to the first bend in the tunnel. The torch grazed the wall, showering sparks and ash. Used to be the walls were there to keep out the beastman, but now they keep out everything. She drew in a sharp breath and looked back. Then she clutched his collar, pulled him forward, and cast the torch down into a pile of stones. Cover the flame. Put it out, she whispered. The quavering light dimmed. They huddled together against the wall. Smoke flowered from the stones before them. Then dissipated on the low moaning wind. Their heartbeats thundered. The ale boy, still wet with grimy lake water, pressed against Auralia's heat. He heard it now. Heavy, wet, uncertain steps. A gurgling wheeze choked with lake water. The visitor advanced one step, another, up the long stretch until he stopped a few steps from the corner. The passage was suddenly illuminated by a warm glow. Auralia peered around the corner toward the entrance. A moment of stillness, and she gestured for the boy to share the view. The corridor was empty. Light touched the wall opposite the curtain, which had been drawn back to release streams of shimmering color. The ale boy could see the shadow of their visitor, a crooked figure outlined on the wall, one massive hand pressed against its head, as if to an injury. "It's the stranger," Auralia said in his ear. "He's come back." "What stranger? From Abisgar?" "No." A chill ran through him, and he began to crawl backward, but Auralia grabbed him by the sleeve and shook her head. "Don't be scared. He's not a normal beast man. He's different. This one, he comes for the colors. He stays. He sleeps. Sometimes I think he cries. Eventually he goes. I don't bother him. He doesn't bother me. I think the colors are helping him." The shadow vanished as the visitor let the curtain close behind him. "Are we safe?" "For now." The ale boy felt a scorch of envy for the visitor who had immersed himself in the light. "The colors." He stood up and stepped back around the corner, drawn toward the music of the hues. "They move." Auralia pulled the sputtering remnant of the torch from the stones and followed on tiptoes. "I know." There was awe in her voice and fear as well. "They're changing. Can't say how I made that happen." She put her lips to his ear. "We shouldn't stay. As long as he's here, it's not safe." "But I said he hasn't bothered me. He hasn't seen you. Let's not test him." Back in the moonlight, their feet clattered on stones, the ale boy looking back at the tunnel with regret. The rising breeze was cold as buried bones. He wondered what she could have meant about the colors. He could think only of the warmth they promised. It was all he could do to move forward toward the lake. These colors spoke to him. Of what, he wasn't certain. "I want to come back again. I want to see those colors." "No," she said flatly. "They're too dangerous." "How?" "They're wild and moving when they're stitched just so. They put that beast man in a trance. No telling what they'll do to you. Don't want you to get burnt." "Fire doesn't scare me." He touched the mark on his brow. "Remember?" "It isn't fire. It's just threads. I just started weaving them together. They're pieces of something, but I can't see what. Not yet. Something's still missing." He found Auralia watching him, as if she hoped to find some answer in his troubled face. "Don't you ever get that feeling," she said with the weariness of someone much older, "when you run up a new path in the woods that you'll find something at the end of it? Something you've never seen?" "Yes," he did not say aloud. "Or maybe you see something move in the lake," she said. and you want to swim to it just to find out what it is. The ale boy glanced quickly, nervously toward the water. The officers don't want me asking things that aren't my business. It's best I stay away from mysteries. They get me into trouble. He imagined himself resting from daily errands, lying on a cot in his humble cave deep beneath the palace in the Underkeep, staring across the bridge-laced abyss of 1,000 torches, watching sparks from lanterns in the brewer's caverns spring out of their glass enclosures and gleam along the floor. A stray spark would sometimes tumble into a spill of ale. In its final hiss and glow, the color would change, swell, blaze, and suddenly fade, leaving a mark in his vision that stayed even when he slept. There are no Abascar guards watching us, ale boy, she said. You don't have to be afraid. He took her hand, led her down close to the water, and found them a dry place to sit on a large, twisted driftwood tree. Taking the bag that had survived his desperate swim, he drew out the ale cups and lined them up on the tree. She remained close, curious. He took the 4 flasks made of skins, uncorked them, and smiled up at her with a glint in his eye that was more than just the moon. Watch. He filled 4 cups with ales of brown, amber, gold, and red. With the confidence of a juggler, he mixed different combinations in the remaining 8 cups. There was purpose in his work. Auralia pounded her knuckles together while she watched. Occasionally, she glanced back at her caves and then wrung the edge of her cloak. He could not repress his smile. And then he sat back, pulled his knees up to his chin, and grinned. Ready? Take the torch. There's still an amber there. Touch it to the edge of each cup. She took the hissing branch, held it out to the cups, and rush. A flame leapt from the lip of the first. The next erupted in fire. She did not need the torch for the rest. The nearness of flame brought answering bursts right down the line until there was a row of straight and steady lights between Auralia and the ale boy, each a different hue. One colder than blue, one bolder than red, and one a sort of rust he had seen only in leaves that cling to trees in defiance of winter. One burnt 3 colors at once, and where they joined at the base of the flame was a searing white gold. They laughed, his happiness rekindled by hers. Fire patrols watched the breweries. A brewer dropped his torch beside a leaking barrel. Pow! He fanned his fingers out. There was nothing left of him when they stamped out the flames. It gave the king an idea. He had folks start making traps for beastmen. At least, that's what Dram tells me. Soldiers can bait beastmen into pools that go up in flames, and he abandoned his story, for the colors had distracted Auralia. It seemed she was listening to them, waiting for them to tell her where she could employ them. He felt a strange pride to see her so engaged. You be careful then, she said at last, blinking, returning to the moment. Colors can be dangerous. They play by invisible rules. Fire doesn't scare me, he said again. As long as she looked into the colors, he found he could speak freely. And so it was there he told the story, as much to himself as to her, the lake and the lights. He was not even aware of the words as they spilled out of him. He remembered the cradle burning around him as the house became a furnace, the shadows all around covering him, a giant reaching through the fire and carrying him away into cold air and darkness, and then down, down, down into the Underkeep. He saw himself there, swallowing the broth offered by an old woman who smelled like apples, or rather, As he grew up, apples smelled like her. Men stood in hushed conferences discussing him and his future, something he recognized even if he could not yet understand their words. Then there were the years of learning to walk along the paths of black earth and across the rope bridges over the deep, expanding spaces of the Underkeep. Lessons in the brewer's discipline. Ale boy, ale boy. As he slowly surfaced from the memories, he became aware of Auralia's intense concentration. It was unsettling to be the focus of someone's attention, and it was good. What it must be like to be the king. How could a man such as that, so closely watched, not burst? He leaned forward and blew out the flames with one steady breath. In the darkness, the story told he was exhausted. I like to be near the flames. It's where I come from. I'm not afraid. It's the only way I can be close to them. To them? To my mother and father, whoever they were, and to whoever pulled me from the fire. No one knows. Auralia pressed her hands to her face, and tears spilled over them. Maybe that's what the beast man is doing here. Maybe the colors are calling it. She nodded, dabbing her cheeks with the edge of the blanket that still covered the boy. You and me are lots the same. I stay near the water because it's where I come from. She was looking out at the lake now, or at something beneath it. When I sleep near the water, I'm closer to the keeper. You think he's actual? The ale boy did not want to speak of this further, but he felt drawn toward the answer. As people grow up, they're embarrassed to think there's something out there they don't understand. It makes them feel small, like maybe they're not in charge, like they have to be careful. She released a whispered laugh. You don't know for certain, do you? He whispered. She turned away from him for a moment, but he saw her hands clench. When she turned back, her eyes had grown larger. She gazed up past the painted face of stone behind them to the overhang of vines and branches. Once, I climbed up there and almost fell asleep. I heard a beast man coming to attack me. I was so afraid. I kept my eyes closed. I did not have time to think who might hear my cry for help. But I called anyway. The beast man screamed. He fell into the water, and then... You think the keeper saved you? She smiled. Do beastmen stumble over cliffs? There was a ripple in the water, and a shape suddenly slipped into their sight. The ale boy jumped up and ran, his feet punching into the soft sand. It's my raft! My raft is here! Quick! I've got to get to it! Auralia grabbed a long and twisted branch and dragged it after him into the shallows. Together they steered the branch to snag a corner of the raft and pull it in to the shore. He salvaged a wine bottle, which he had intended for the gatekeeper who would let him back into the house. He uncorked it and offered it to her. Thank you, he said, for saving me from that stranger. She blinked, stunned. She had forgotten. She did not take the bottle, but she cupped her hands to him. He laughed and poured the wine, which trickled through her fingers, dark and gleaming. Her hair spilled around her hands as she sipped it carefully. When she lifted her head again, the wine had smoothed the creases in her face. Now that, he said, is how to drink the king's wine. He glanced out at the sky over the lake. Sun's going to be up soon, and I'm going to get an earful from the officers in charge of me. Auralia stepped forward and threw her arms around him. Her neck smelled like smoke and honey. Her heartbeat fluttered against his face. She held him the way he'd always imagined his mother would. Then he sneezed and made great apology as she let him go and laughed. He offered her the blanket she had draped around his shoulders. "You must take this. They'll never let me keep it." "Come visit me again," she said, folding the cloth and holding it to her breast. "Oh, I wish I knew your name. What am I going to call you? Little brother?" "Just call me Ale Boy. That's what they all do." "But I know your real name," she laughed. "It's here. I just don't know how to pronounce it." Again, she touched his forehead scar. "Promise me one thing. When I'm gone, will you play with your lights here by the lake?" "When you're gone?" Nearby, a fish jumped. Fluttering bats darted past and jittered out over the water. "I can't stay here forever. I'll be caught and hauled into the house, or someone will come and take over these caves, or something." She broke off, bit her lower lip, and looked back at the dark stones where the colors slept until morning. "I'd feel better. It wouldn't be so sad if I could finish my work and know that someone will come to watch over the colors." He was still. Emotions surged in him like waves. The creature in her caves, the mysterious colors, the shadow in the lake, Abascar. She suddenly seemed vulnerable. "Be careful, Auralia." Auralia sat on the stones as the ale boy shoved off with his oar, and the raft drifted back out into the water. They watched silently until they could not see each other. It seemed to the ale boy that he was remaining still while the world turned and took her away, filling the space between them with deep water and traces of starlight. Again, thank you to Christine for this beautiful image. There's more to the chapter. I'm going to advance the slide to the next image. The forest went on dreaming while Auralia folded her thoughts and set them aside for the night. She sat on the cliff edge, swinging her feet into space as if she might find a foothold and walk away on the air. She watched the lake following the progress of that small speck of darkness drifting through reflected stars. This was a new feeling, something different from what she felt in the volatile company of the gatherers. She had a friend. And there was something else puzzling her. The colors had drawn the attention of the beastly stranger yet again, this foul-smelling hulk of hair, claws, and teeth. She had been surprised at her own reluctance to call the visitor a beast man. With his deformity and crude intelligence, what else could he be? But he was drawn to her caves, to stare into the colors, to sleep surrounded by the bowls of incense. There was still a mystery to her. Uncomfortable with the thought of cooking or sleeping in her caves while such a shadow lurked nearby, Auralia had tiptoed around the slumbering creature, bundled patches of unfinished weave, and brought them up the corridor, deeper and deeper, until she reached the hollows, where a feeble mountain stream fell into a buried river. There she climbed a rugged, narrow stair that took her to the top of the cliffs. She emerged above her lakeside home and took shelter from the breeze beneath trees with warped and bristling branches. She spread the spans of faintly glowing cloth across a bed of brown, broad mushrooms. There she fingered the frayed edges of each piece, imagining what might join one to the other and bring order to their dissonance. In the distance, she heard a faint trace of the early morning verse. She did not sing along. The waters of the lake grew restless, a white thread winding along the edge. Whispering soft comfort to herself, she set the instruments of her craft before her, needles, leaf packets of dye, spools of various threads. She wove strands drawn from the stems of wild celery, stained her fingertips with dye, all crazy with colors of fireweed and swamp muck green. Whenever I visit the gatherers, they're talking about you, she repeated to herself. You think I don't know what they say? North child, dark secrets, a danger to them all, a spy. She twisted one red thread around her fingertips, drawing it taut to the snapping point. We will leave Auralia there and come back for chapter 9 soon. Thank you again to Christine Makasheep for the glorious artwork. We will see more in chapters to come. Not a lot more, but some. And perhaps some images from other artists as well. If you know anyone who has done Auralia art, please bring it to my attention so that perhaps I can feature it in an upcoming episode. I have one image in particular. It's actually right back there behind the green lampshade in a reflecting frame. It's facing the other wall, so you can't see it. But there is another image I will be sharing with you near the end of the book that is one of my favorites as well, by a different artist altogether. So again, thank you for listening, and next time we will read chapter 9.